Would you dare to attend the wedding of the woman who broke your heart with a complete stranger as your date? The rain fell in angry sheets against the glass, but it was nothing compared to the storm unraveling in Mason Wright's chest. The envelope in his trembling hands bore a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years: Clara Beaumont. That name, once laced with laughter and whispered dreams, now carried the sting of betrayal. He stared at the embossed gold lettering. Elegant, cold, final, a wedding invitation. Her wedding, not to him. His jaw clenched as he tore it open, scanning the neatly printed words like they were a sentence handed down by a cruel judge. Clara Beaumont and Nicholas Vale cordially invite... He stopped reading. Nicholas. Of course, it would be Nicholas. The man who'd circled his life like a vulture, charming, ambitious, always one step behind Mason, until now, until Clara, until this. Mason stood frozen in his high-rise apartment, the city lights behind him nothing more than smudged ghosts. In the storm, 3 years ago, he had been everything. The youngest architect to ever land a government contract, the golden boy. And Clara had been his everything. Until one morning she was gone. No note, no goodbye, just silence that echoed louder than any argument. A knock interrupted the static in his head. He opened the door to find Ezra, his oldest friend, holding a six-pack and a knowing expression. "You got it, didn't you?" Ezra asked, stepping inside uninvited. Mason didn't answer. He didn't need to. The discarded invitation on the kitchen counter said it all. Ezra sighed, cracking open a beer. "You gonna go?" he asked after a pause. Cautious, Mason let out a bitter laugh. "What would be the point, so I can applaud their twisted love story from the sidelines?" He paced the floor. "She left without a word, and now she wants me there to bless it?" Ezra leaned back on the couch. "Then don't go, or go with someone that makes them both question everything. Show up with a story of your own." Mason scoffed, but a seed was planted, a dangerous, tempting seed. That night the city hummed like it always did, indifferent to heartbreak. Mason wandered into a late-night diner, searching for silence in clinking cutlery and half-empty coffee cups. That's when he saw her. Sitting in a corner booth, soaked from the rain, hoodie up, scribbling something on a napkin with intense focus. She couldn't have been more than 23. And yet something in her eyes told him she had lived through storms much worse than his. He didn't know why he approached. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch when he slid into the seat across from her. "You know," she said without looking up, "it's polite to ask before invading someone's personal space." Mason blinked, taken aback. "Sorry, I just had nowhere else to be," she finished, finally looking up. Her eyes were sharp, defiant, alive. "Join the club." They talked for hours. She called herself Iris. She was clever, sarcastic, and cagey about her past. But she listened, really listened. Mason found himself saying things he hadn't told anyone in years, about Clara, about the success that felt more like a cage. Iris didn't judge. She just saw him. When the diner closed, he offered to drive her somewhere. She refused. "I'm used to making my own way," she said with a smirk, vanishing into the rain. The next morning, Mason stood staring at his closet, Clara's invitation burning in his mind. The storm hadn't passed. It had only shifted. He thought of Iris, of the fire in her voice, of how it felt to be seen. An idea formed, wild, reckless, maybe even cruel. But he picked up his phone anyway. That afternoon he found her again. Same booth, same hoodie, same guarded eyes. "I have a proposition," he said, sitting across from her. Iris raised an eyebrow. "Is this where you tell me I could be a model, or are we skipping the cliché?" Mason smiled despite himself. "I want you to come with me, as my date, to a wedding." She stared at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. You want to pay a stranger to make your ex jealous. He nodded. Basically. Iris leaned back, assessing. You really are heartbroken, huh? Mason didn't flinch. I just want her to see I'm not broken. Silence stretched between them. Then Iris grinned. Okay, but if I'm going to play the part, I get to pick the dress. Mason blinked. Deal. And just like that, a pact was made. One that would unravel secrets, rewrite lives, and blur the line between vengeance and redemption. And neither of them had any idea who the other really was. 3 days later, Iris stood in front of a full-length mirror in a private suite of one of the most exclusive designer houses in the city. Gone was the rain-soaked hoodie, the tattered jeans, the unbothered slouch. In their place, a gown. Deep, emerald green, sculpted to perfection, clung to her like armor. She stared at herself, expression unreadable. This doesn't feel like me, she muttered. Mason stood behind her, hands in his pockets, watching. It's not supposed to, he said. It's supposed to feel like the version of you that can walk into that wedding and make everyone stop breathing. Iris turned to face him, eyes narrowed. So you want a mannequin or a person? He stepped closer. I want someone who owns the room the second she walks in. I think that's already you. This, he gestured at the dress, just helps. The rest of them see it. She studied him for a long moment, then turned back to the mirror. I hope you know what you're doing. Mason smiled faintly. So do I. What he didn't say, what he wouldn't admit even to himself, was that the idea of Iris becoming part of his world scared him, because every second they spent together, he felt the past unraveling. Not Clara, not the betrayal, just this strange new presence that both grounded and disarmed him. The night before the wedding, they stayed in a hotel near the venue. Mason was pacing in his room, rehearsing responses, trying to imagine Clara's face when she saw him, but what kept distracting him was the sound of Iris laughing 2 doors down, on a phone call with someone he didn't know she had. A brother? A friend? She hadn't said. He leaned against the wall, eavesdropping like a guilty teenager. Her voice was warm, lighter than he'd ever heard it. I told you I wasn't done, she said, then paused. Yeah, he's not just a pawn. Not anymore. But this isn't about him. Another pause. No, he doesn't know. And he won't. Not until it's over. Mason backed away from the wall, heart pounding. Something shifted in the air. Iris had secrets, big ones, and they might just include him. The wedding day dawned bright and cruel, a golden sky that mocked Mason's nerves. The venue, a vineyard in the hills, was perfection, every detail orchestrated to impress. As they pulled up in the sleek black car, Mason felt Iris's hand on his arm. Nervous, she asked, her eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. He forced a smile. Aren't you? She tilted her head. I don't get nervous. I get ready. They walked through the crowd of socialites and influencers like ghosts from another world. Mason's heart pounded in his throat, but Iris never faltered. Heads turned, conversations stopped. Even before Clara appeared, they had already changed the air. And then Clara came into view, beautiful, composed, holding Nicholas's arm like a trophy. But her smile faded the moment she saw Mason. Clara's eyes darted to Iris. Her composure slipped just for a breath. Iris extended a perfectly manicured hand. Iris Monroe, a pleasure. Clara took it slowly, like it might burn her. Clara Vale, she said almost defensively. Nicholas stepped forward, ever the politician. And what do you do, Iris? She smiled. I create illusions, and occasionally I shatter them. Nicholas blinked. Clara swallowed hard. They moved on, leaving a silence in their wake. Mason leaned toward Iris. What was that? She didn't look at him. I just declared war, she said softly. You'll understand later. The ceremony began. Vows exchanged, applause, toasts. But Mason couldn't focus. Not on Clara, not on Nicholas. His eyes kept finding Iris, and the more he watched her, the more he realized she didn't just belong in this world, she had once ruled it. Later, as the sun dipped low and the party moved to the grand ballroom, a man approached them. Tall, older, impeccably dressed. "Iris," he said, "I didn't think I'd see you again." Her body tensed. "Hello, Edward." Mason glanced between them. "Friend of yours?" Edward smiled at Mason. "Her godfather. Or at least I was, before the fall." Iris turned to Mason. "Can we talk? Now." They stepped into a quiet hallway. Iris's mask slipped. "That man was the reason my family lost everything. And now he's part of this wedding. This wasn't coincidence, Mason. This was fate." He stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about?" She exhaled. "I didn't come here just for you. I came here to end something that started a long time ago. And Clara, she's not innocent in any of it." Mason's world tilted. "You planned this." Iris nodded. "Not all of it, but enough. You wanted revenge. I needed closure. Maybe we can give each other both." He stared at her, the woman in the emerald dress, and realized he no longer knew what game they were playing, or who was playing who. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a battlefield. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, laughter floating like perfume through the air. But outside, in the garden beyond the glass doors, the night whispered a different tune. Mason stood there, hands in his pockets, heart a thunderstorm beneath his ribs. Iris was inside, laughing with strangers, her eyes scanning the room like a strategist on a battlefield. Every now and then she'd glance at him, but not for reassurance, for confirmation. He couldn't shake what she'd told him, that Clara, his Clara, had played a role in destroying Iris's family, that the woman who'd once shared his dreams had betrayed more than just him. "Closure," Iris had said, but Mason felt no closure, only confusion, and a growing suspicion that this night was the beginning of something darker than either of them had prepared for. He wandered into the far end of the garden, where the lanterns didn't quite reach, and found a bench beneath a sycamore tree. It was there, in the half-light, that Clara found him. She didn't speak at first, just sat beside him, her perfume stirring old memories. "She's stunning," Clara said eventually, her voice low. "Mysterious, dangerous." Mason didn't respond. Clara sighed. "I knew you'd come. I knew you wouldn't let me win so easily." Mason turned to her slowly. "Win?" Clara laughed softly, almost sadly. "That's what it always was, wasn't it? A competition. Between you and Nicholas. Between love and ambition." He shook his head. "I never wanted to compete with him. I just wanted you." She looked down at her hands, bare except for the massive engagement ring. "I thought I had no choice. Until now." He blinked. "What do you mean?" But Clara didn't answer. Instead, she stood. "Be careful with her, Mason. She's not who you think she is." Then she vanished back into the party, leaving him in a silence thicker than before. He barely had time to process when a voice behind him said, "Told you she was a snake." Iris, arms crossed, watching from the shadows. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough." They walked together through the vines behind the garden wall. The music was faint now, distant. "What exactly happened to your family?" Mason asked quietly. Iris hesitated. Then, in measured words, she said, "We were old money. My father owned half the coastline, real estate, shipping, power, but he trusted the wrong people, people like Edward Lennox, my godfather, and Clara's father." Mason stopped walking. "Clara's father." Iris nodded. "He and Edward orchestrated a hostile acquisition. My father thought they were friends. They gutted everything, left us with debt, shame, and silence. My mother didn't survive the fall." Her voice cracked slightly. Mason's breath caught. He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Don't. Sympathy is poison in a war." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the scars beneath the elegance, the desperation beneath the control. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" he asked. Iris met his eyes. "Because I didn't trust you yet." A beat of silence. Then she added, "But I think I do now." The wind shifted. Somewhere a champagne glass shattered. They both turned instinctively. Back inside, a crowd was forming near the main staircase. Voices rose. Iris grabbed Mason's hand and pulled him toward the chaos. A woman was sobbing. A man shouted something about betrayal. Then Nicholas stepped into the center, arms raised like a conductor calming an orchestra. "It's nothing," he insisted. "Just a misunderstanding." But Mason saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, and the way Clara wasn't, standing by his side. Later, in a quiet corner of the venue, Iris and Mason sat together again. "He's hiding something," Iris murmured. "They all are," Mason replied. She nodded slowly. "Then let's dig. Tonight." Mason glanced at her. "You came armed for this, didn't you?" Iris smirked. "I never arrive unprepared." She pulled out her phone and showed him a folder. Emails, legal documents, hacked accounts, everything I could find about Nicholas and Clara's financial entanglements. "There's a pattern, one that leads to Edward's offshore holdings." Mason stared at her. "You're not just seeking closure, you want retribution." Her eyes met his. "I want truth, and if it burns them to the ground, so be it." Mason leaned back, the pieces shifting rapidly in his mind. Clara, Nicholas, Edward, Iris, himself, and a web of lies woven between them all. "Then let's finish what you started," he said, voice steady. Iris's smile returned, sharp, dangerous, electric. "Now you're speaking my language." And so, under the glittering lights of a false celebration, they began the next phase of their plan, not as strangers anymore, but as co-conspirators. Maybe even something more. The guest rooms at the estate were lined with corridors that whispered secrets. Mason walked beside Iris in silence, her phone illuminating their path like a torch in an ancient tomb. Every so often she paused, tapped the screen, then moved on. "There's a secure server somewhere in this building," she whispered. "I saw the port in Edward's office earlier. It's air-gapped, old school, means whatever's on it is valuable enough to stay offline." Mason glanced at her. "And you think it connects Clara and Nicholas to your family's downfall?" Iris nodded once. "If I'm right, this server holds correspondence, documents, deals, proof, not just of fraud, of conspiracy." Mason hesitated. "And if we're caught?" Iris didn't slow down. "Then I guess the wedding will get more dramatic than planned." They reached the east wing. Most guests were still in the ballroom, dancing beneath chandeliers, oblivious. Iris pressed her ear to a door, listened, then picked the lock with quiet precision. "I used to sneak into the wine cellar when I was 13, she said. "Turns out breaking in and breaking through aren't that different." Inside, Edward Lennox's office smelled of leather and aged bourbon. An ornate desk, a locked cabinet, and, just as Iris had said, a small terminal humming softly behind. A velvet curtain. Mason stood watch as Iris worked. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, her face illuminated by green code. "I need 5 minutes," she murmured. "Once I'm in, I'll transfer it to my drive. Then we ghost." Mason turned his head toward the door. "You have 4. Her smirk didn't waver. "Then I better not make a typo." Outside the room, the sounds of the party were fading, replaced by whispers. Someone was coming. Mason's pulse quickened. "Iris." "Almost there," she whispered. Then ding! She yanked the drive out and shut the terminal down. They slipped out just as the doorknob turned. From the shadows, they watched Edward enter, scan the room, and frown. He sensed something, but not enough. Back in their suite, Iris plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered, then bloomed with files, emails between Edward and Nicholas, financial statements signed by Clara, shell corporations, land theft, forged contracts, and most damning, a letter implicating Clara in a deliberate smear campaign against Iris's father. "She didn't just stand by," Iris whispered. "She pushed the blade." Mason sat down slowly. His hands trembled. Clara, the woman he once planned to marry. "She lied to me every day." Iris closed the laptop gently. "They all lie. That's what people like them do." He turned to her. "And what about us?" She paused, met his gaze. "That's the difference. We didn't lie to each other, not when it mattered." The next morning, the estate woke to news. Nicholas's firm had been hit with an anonymous financial leak. Rumors swirled. Investors called in panic. Clara's publicist was seen storming through the gardens on her phone, shouting in 3 languages. At breakfast, tension was a third guest at every table. Edward looked pale. Nicholas looked furious. And Clara looked scared. Iris sipped her espresso, cool as stone. The clock just started ticking. Mason nodded. "They'll trace it eventually." Iris smiled. "Let them. That's part of the plan." Mason studied her. "And what's the rest of it?" She leaned forward. "We give them something they didn't expect. We let them try to fight back. And when they do, we pull the last thread." Later that day, Nicholas confronted Mason in the wine cellar. No guards, no lawyers, just 2 men and a war between them. "You think this is a game?" Nicholas growled. Mason stepped closer. "No, I think this is justice." Nicholas smirked. "You're being used. That girl? She's not who you think." Mason's eyes narrowed. "I know exactly who she is, and unlike you, she doesn't hide behind lies." Nicholas lunged. Mason blocked. A punch landed. Blood spilled. They separated, breathing hard. "You should have stayed gone," Nicholas spat. Mason wiped his lip. "And let you win? Never." Upstairs, Clara stared at her reflection. Her perfect world was crumbling, and deep down she knew who held the match. "Harper Kensington," she whispered, using Iris's real name for the first time in years. She picked up her phone. "Get me Graves, now!" Julian Graves didn't do favors. He made trades, cold, calculated, dangerous trades. When Clara's call came through, he was already en route. He hadn't been invited to the wedding, but he never needed an invitation to walk through someone's front door. He arrived in a sleek black car, stepped out wearing a steel gray suit, and smiled like he already knew how the night would end. Clara met him in a side parlor, the one with the locked windows and heavy curtains. "It's her," she said before he could speak. "She's here." Graves poured himself a drink from her decanter, took a slow sip. "And you waited until now to tell me?" Clara's fingers clenched. "I thought she was gone. I thought her name died with the bankruptcy." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Clearly you thought wrong." She showed him a picture from the security cameras. Harper, standing beside Mason laughing, a ghost brought back to life in silken heels. "She's already moving against us," Clara said. "Someone leaked documents. Nicholas's investors are panicking." Graves studied the image. "If Harper's back, it's not just for show. She's building something." He set the glass down. "And I want to know what." Elsewhere in the estate, Mason was tending to his bruised lip, while Harper, paced the room. "We rattled the cage," she said. "Now they'll show their teeth." Mason nodded slowly. "I've never seen Clara shaken like this." Harper looked out the window. "She should be. Everything she built was founded on betrayal. Now it's her turn to lose sleep." She turned. "We move tonight. I want to end this." Mason raised a brow. "What does end mean to you exactly?" Harper's eyes burned. It means I take back the name they tried to bury. It means Clara loses everything she thought made her powerful. And it means Edward Lennox is dragged into the light with the rest of them. Mason studied her for a long moment. And after that, she blinked, unsure. I don't know. Night fell like a curtain, thick and black. The wedding reception shifted into a masquerade, a tradition Clara claimed was romantic. In truth, it was another layer of masks. Harper donned hers, a silver piece with sharp angles. Mason wore a black one, simple, elegant. They entered the ballroom again, a kingdom of false faces and dangerous smiles. Graves spotted her immediately. He didn't approach, he never did. He watched, measured, and slowly began circling the room, quietly pulling strings. Within an hour, whispers spread through the party like wildfire. That girl in the emerald dress, wasn't she a Kensington? Didn't her father die in prison? I heard she used to own this estate. Clara kept smiling, but her champagne glass trembled. Harper felt it, the shift. People watching her, some with curiosity, some with guilt, a few with fear. She walked with Mason to the edge of the ballroom, to the long corridor that led to the family archives. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded. "There's one last piece, a record Edward kept. If we get it, we can link him to the shell companies, everything." They moved quickly, dodging waiters and guests. The archives were behind a locked door. Harper pulled a key from her clutch. "I made a copy earlier," she said. Mason raised a brow. "Remind me never to cross you." They slipped inside. Dust, old paintings, boxes of ledgers. Harper knew exactly where to look. She found the metal safe hidden behind a false panel. "Combination?" Mason asked. Harper knelt, her fingers flying over the dials. "My father's birthday," she whispered. Click. The door opened. Inside, a manila folder thick with contracts, offshore routing instructions, a ledger showing money funneled from Harper's trust to Edward's accounts, signed by Clara's father. Mason read in silence. This proves everything." Harper nodded, voice hoarse. "This is the blade they used." Suddenly, footsteps, fast, angry. "Clara!" She stormed in, face flushed. "I should have burned it," she hissed, "but I wanted to keep it as a trophy." Mason stepped forward. "You kept it because deep down you knew she'd come back." Clara laughed bitterly. "No, I kept it because I never believed she'd be strong enough to return." Harper stepped between them. "Surprise!" The silence stretched thick and electric. Clara's eyes glistened. "You don't know what you're doing. If you release that, you destroy your own name." Harper's voice was ice. "You already destroyed it. I'm just reclaiming what's left." Clara's lip curled. "You won't win." Harper smiled. "I already have." Outside the door, Graves was listening and smiling, because now the real game could begin. The morning after the masquerade was colder than expected, despite the sunlight slicing through the vineyard hills. Harper stood barefoot on the stone balcony, the folder of evidence in her hands, her mind a battlefield. The proof of betrayal, of stolen wealth and orchestrated downfall sat like fire between her fingers. But now that she had it, now that revenge was within reach, she felt something unfamiliar, hesitation. Mason stepped out behind her, 2 coffees in hand. He didn't say anything, just handed her the cup. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. I kept wondering, when this is over, what am I left with?" Mason leaned on the railing. "You wanted justice. Now you have it." Harper exhaled. "Then why doesn't it feel like enough?" In the estate's drawing room, Julian Graves sipped his espresso slowly as Clara paced. "She has the documents," Clara snapped. "She's going to bury me." Graves gave a lazy smile. "Then it's a good thing you called me," Clara frowned. "You said you'd handle it." Graves stood, brushing lint from his sleeve. "Oh, I will. But everything has a price, Clara, and yours is long overdue." Before Clara could respond, Graves was gone. gliding through the halls like a shadow. He found Harper an hour later in the gardens, alone. "You've grown up," he said, stepping into view. Harper didn't turn. "I was forced to." Graves nodded. "You have your father's fire and your mother's eyes. Shame what happened to them." She faced him then, calm and cold. "You came to negotiate?" Graves smirked. "You always were quick. Yes, you've stirred the pot, but I can help you serve it while it's hot. With my reach, this file could bring down Edward, Clara, Nicholas, all of them, publicly, permanently." Harper folded her arms. "And in return?" His smile widened. "When the dust settles, I want a piece of what comes next. Whatever empire rises from these ashes, I want a seat at the table." Harper stared at him, then glanced at Mason, who'd just arrived, catching the tail end of the conversation. "He wants in," she said. Mason didn't hesitate. "No," Graves chuckled. "And you think you have a choice? The vultures are already circling. If you want to finish this war, you need someone who knows where the bodies are buried and who buried them." Harper looked between them. "We don't have time for a clean plan. We need this done." Mason's jaw tightened. "You trust him?" Harper's voice was low. "No, but I trust what he wants." Graves extended a hand. "Do we have a deal?" Harper stared at it, then shook it. "We do." Graves smiled like a devil at the gates of heaven. "Good, let's bring it all down." That afternoon, Harper released the files anonymously through Graves' network. The documents spread like wildfire. Business sites, financial watchdogs, political blogs, headlines erupted. "Lennox family fortune built on fraud." "Clara Vale implicated in multi-million-dollar land scam." Investors panicked, journalists called, and behind closed doors the once powerful trio scrambled to keep their empire from collapsing. Edward Lennox went into hiding. Nicholas tried to deny everything, but one of his former partners turned on him within hours. And Clara watched her world crack in real time. She gave a statement to the press, calm and polished, claiming ignorance. But no one bought it. The scent of desperation clung to her like perfume. Back at the estate, Mason found Harper alone in the library. She was staring at an old family portrait, her as a girl, standing between her parents. "It's done," he said. She nodded. "They're falling." Mason stepped closer. "So why do you still look haunted?" Harper turned to him. "Because the ghosts don't go away just because you win." He didn't speak, just reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "Then let me help you bury them." She looked up, tears threatening. "You still trust me, after everything?" Mason nodded. "I trust who you are now, and I see who you've become." She leaned into him, finally letting herself breathe. But outside, in the rain that had started to fall, again, Julian Graves lit a cigar and watched the clouds roll in. Because for all the chaos he had helped ignite, this wasn't the end for him. It was just the beginning of his leverage. The news cycle spun faster than anyone could follow. Clara's face appeared on every screen, her voice trembling beneath polished words as she denied involvement. Nicholas issued a statement through his lawyer. Edward Lennox's silence, however, spoke loudest. Stocks plummeted, properties froze, partners fled. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a collapse. One that Harper watched with quiet, unwavering focus. Mason entered their suite carrying 2 glasses of wine. "It's happening," he said, "just like you said it would." Harper stood at the window, arms folded. "It took a decade to destroy my family's name, and 4 days to burn theirs." She turned to him, accepting the wine. "But you still look like you're waiting for something to go wrong." Mason hesitated. "Because it usually does." They sat together in silence, the fallout unfolding. Around them, Mason finally spoke. I was in love with Clara once, so much that I couldn't see what she really was. Harper looked down. I know that feeling. My father trusted Edward with everything. It's the people closest to us who always hold the sharpest knives. She took a sip of wine, but they forgot one thing. Mason tilted his head. What's that? Her voice was calm. We survived. Later that evening, a white envelope arrived for Harper. No postage, no handwriting. Just her name in gold leaf. Inside, a single invitation card. Julian Graves. Request your presence at a private gathering. Midnight, Villa Argento. Mason read it over her shoulder. He moves fast. Harper smirked. He always does. Mason frowned. You sure we should trust him? Harper's gaze sharpened. I don't. But if he wants to meet now, it means there's more. Villa Argento sat at the edge of the vineyard cliffs, cold and silent under the moonlight. They arrived just before midnight. A butler opened the door without a word, leading them through echoing marble halls into a low-lit room where Graves sat by the fireplace, alone. I see you got my note, he said without looking up. Not exactly subtle, Harper replied. Neither was the fall of Clara Vale. Graves gestured to the chairs opposite him. Sit. They obeyed. You've done well, he continued. But I assume you didn't think it would end here. Harper's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Graves finally met her gaze. You burned down their empire. Bravo. But in doing so, you uncovered something larger. A pattern. One you weren't meant to see. Mason leaned forward. What pattern? Graves tossed a folder onto the table. 6 bankruptcies in the last 5 years, all orchestrated through the same offshore routes, all connected to Lennox or one of his shell networks. Harper flipped through the pages. Names, properties, victims. He wasn't just destroying us, she murmured. He was running a system, Graves nodded. And it didn't stop with you. Mason looked up. Why are you showing us this? Graves poured himself a drink. Because you're in it now, whether you like it or not, and because I need someone on the inside to finish what I can't. Harper raised an eyebrow. You want us to take down the rest? Graves smiled thinly. You're already halfway there. Silence stretched. Then Harper closed the folder. What's the catch? Graves leaned back. You'll be doing it without my help this time. I'll be stepping away, temporarily. Mason stiffened. Why? Graves didn't answer. He just stood, picked up his glass, and walked to the window. Some battles require shadows. This one will demand light. And you too. You're the only one still clean enough to play that part. They left, Villa Argento in silence. Mason drove while Harper stared out the window, the folder in her lap. He's right, she said finally. This isn't over. Mason nodded. But we choose what it becomes now. She turned to him, eyes burning. Then let's finish what my father started. Back at the estate, Clara stood alone in the wine cellar, surrounded by unopened bottles and broken dreams. Her phone buzzed, a blocked number. She answered. Clara Vale, a voice rasped. Yes, she whispered. You've made enemies, the voice said, but if you want them gone, we can help. She didn't respond, because she already knew the war wasn't over. It had just changed form. A week passed. The estate emptied out, guests scurried away from the ruins of scandal, and Harper remained. She walked the corridors alone, memorizing shadows, the silence heavier now. Mason watched her from a distance, unsure when she started drifting. Perhaps the moment victory became a question mark. Retribution had a cost, and Harper was counting it in sleepless nights and memories she couldn't erase. They met in the old greenhouse, where her mother once grew lavender. Mason found her seated on the stone bench, the folder open beside her, more pages marked now. Still digging? He asked softly. Harper didn't look up. There's something missing, A link between these companies, the final beneficiary. Graves showed us the map, but not the destination. Mason sat beside her. You think he knows? She finally turned. I think he always knows. That night, Harper made a call she never thought she would. She used a number that hadn't been dialed in 5 years. Her godmother's. The woman answered after 2 rings. Harper, the voice trembled. Is it really you? Harper closed her eyes. I need the name, the one behind the offshore accounts my father warned you about. You said you'd protect it until I was ready. Silence. Then, are you sure you're ready now? Harper nodded into the quiet. I'm not asking for permission anymore. The next morning, the name arrived in a sealed envelope slipped under her door. Harper didn't open it immediately. She stared at it like a weapon, unsure if she was the one holding the blade or if she was the target. Mason watched her from across the room. You don't have to do this alone, he said. She smiled faintly. But I always have. When she tore it open, the name was short, familiar, unimaginable. Alden Graves. Mason read it over her shoulder. Julian's brother? Harper nodded slowly. Dead for a decade, or so they claimed. But he's the one who ran the fund laundering everything. He's the ghost behind the machine. Mason rubbed his temples. And Julian never told us. It was betrayal again, but colder this time. Because this wasn't enemies twisting knives. This was an ally playing chess 3 moves ahead. Harper paced the floor, fury growing. He used us, fed us crumbs while protecting his own blood. Mason's voice was low. We confront him? Harper shook her head. No, we expose him. But Julian Graves had vanished. The next few days were a blur of closed doors and unanswered calls. His penthouse was empty, offices shut down, accounts frozen. He'd gone underground. Mason began to suspect he never existed in the system to begin with. Harper, however, became obsessed. She pinned maps, printed files, connected strings. He didn't run, she said. He's hiding in plain sight, waiting to see what we'll do. They returned to the city and visited Graves's last known associate, a tech broker named Lenny Rhodes. Lenny lived in a loft filled with monitors and server racks. He greeted Harper with a resigned look. If you're here, then Julian underestimated you. Harper crossed her arms. Tell me where he is. Lenny hesitated. He's not gone. But he's buried so deep you won't find him unless he wants to be found. Mason stepped in. Then give him a reason. That night, Harper wrote an open letter. It wasn't angry, it wasn't desperate. It was truth, clean, sharp, and damning. She published it under her real name, Harper Kensington. She told the world how her family was destroyed, how Edward and Clara were pawns, how the true king never left the throne. And at the bottom of the letter, a challenge. The man in the shadows knows who he is. Come face your legacy. It went. Viral in 6 hours. Graves reappeared in 12. He didn't speak to them directly. Instead, a box was delivered. Inside, an old Kensington ledger, annotated, marked, with a note written in black ink. Finish the story. Then decide who you want to become. Harper held the book against her chest. Her hands trembled. He's giving me a choice, she whispered. Mason nodded. Then make the right one. But Harper wasn't sure what that meant anymore. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It sets the whole world on fire. The ledger was a relic. Bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed with time, but its contents, meticulously curated, were anything but obsolete. Every entry, every note, every signature told a story Harper had never been allowed to hear. And now it echoed in her. Hands like a curse. She spent 2 days alone, buried in it, refusing food, ignoring Mason's quiet knocks. This wasn't just her family's history. It was a roadmap to vengeance and to temptation. Mason finally entered on the 3rd night, uninvited. He found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by photocopies, post-its, red string across the wall. "Harper," he said gently, "you need to rest." She looked up slowly. Her eyes were dark hollows, her voice hoarse. "I can't, not yet." He knelt beside her. "You're scaring me." Harper blinked. "Good. That means I'm close." She pointed to a series of entries, dates, amounts, project codes. "They were building something," she said. "It started before the fall. My father funneled resources into a trust called E7. Julian helped hide it, but Alden, his brother, expanded it. It was supposed to be a legacy fund, safe money for reinvention." Mason frowned. "And now?" Harper's mouth twisted. "Now it's poison in the water." The next morning, Harper took the ledger to the press. Mason tried to stop her. "You release this, and you become the story. Your name, your family, your trauma, front page." Harper didn't flinch. "Maybe that's the price. Maybe the truth demands a face." Mason shook his head. "Or maybe Graves wants you to fall into that spotlight so he can vanish again." She stared at him, then lowered the folder. "Then what do you suggest?" He walked to the window. "We don't just expose them, we outplay them. Use the ledger to trap Graves and Alden. Leak only what draws them into the open." Harper's eyes narrowed. "You want to bait them?" Mason turned back. "I want them to feel the fire before they burn." Later that evening, they held a private meeting with a whistleblower attorney, Vivian Cole, once a prosecutor, now a myth. Vivian read the ledger in silence, her expression sharpening with every page. When she finished, she exhaled through her teeth. "This isn't just corruption," she said. "This is empire building through engineered ruin. If even half of this is verified, they're done." Vivian agreed to represent Harper anonymously at first. She would begin investigations, test the waters. "But when the time comes," she warned, "you'll need to speak, not Harper Quinn, Harper Kensington." Harper nodded, though her throat tightened. "When the time comes," she echoed. But not everyone was waiting. That night, while Mason slept, Harper received another envelope, no name, no return address. Inside, a photo of her father, dead, or so she believed, dated only 6 months earlier. She stared at it for hours, her fingers shaking. At dawn, she packed a single bag and vanished. When Mason woke to find her gone, the note left behind was short. "Don't follow. This is something I have to see myself." He stared at the words like they were written in fire. Because the war wasn't just external now, it was personal. The journey led Harper into the forgotten corners of the country, a town without a name on most maps. Dust-covered windows, gas stations with analog pumps, silence that tasted like secrecy. She followed the coordinates scribbled on the back of the photo until she reached a modest cabin tucked at the end of a gravel path. There was no mailbox, no lights, but a car in the back told her someone was still here. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she stepped up to the door. Her hand trembled. She knocked, once, twice, then waited. The door creaked open, revealing an older man with deep-set eyes and a scar down one cheek. He stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "Harper?" he whispered, and then he collapsed into a chair. "Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. "You're alive." He looked thinner. "Paler?" But it was him, Julian Kensington, the man who'd vanished in disgrace, presumed dead in a scandal he hadn't orchestrated. Tears welled in Harper's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Why?" she asked. "Why let us think you were gone?" He buried his face in his hands. "Because they would have killed you if they knew I wasn't." Julian told her everything, that Alden Graves had threatened his family, that Clara's father had forged documents to ensure Julian took the fall, that when the pressure mounted, Julian chose exile over execution. "They didn't just destroy our name," he said. "They hunted us. I faked the crash, hid. But I watched. I saw you grow. I saw what they did to you. Harper's hands balled into fists. And you let it happen. His voice cracked. You were safer without me. She walked to the window, the horizon blurred. I became a weapon because I had to. I burned everything they built, thinking you died because of them. Now I find out you ran. He stood unsteady. I didn't run. I prepared. I collected what I could. And now, with you back, we finish it. He opened a hidden drawer and pulled out another folder, older, thicker, marked Phase 2. Harper's blood turned to ice. She opened it slowly. Names, transactions, government contracts, offshore assets. It wasn't just Graves and Alden. It was a syndicate, interwoven, invisible, and far larger than she ever imagined. They built a system, Julian said. But they forgot something. Systems fail when their architects turn against them. Harper looked up. You kept all of this, waiting for someone to come back. He nodded. I waited for you. That night, Harper didn't sleep. She read every page, made copies, charted links. For the first time, she saw the full machine and the spark that could burn it to ash. But with it came a choice: expose everything and trigger a war that could drag innocents into the fire, or dismantle it piece by piece, methodically, silently. She returned to the city 3 days later, changed. Mason met her at the edge of the train platform. Where did you go? He asked, breathless. To bury the ghost, she replied. He studied her. You found him, didn't you? She nodded. He's alive, and he gave me something you need to see. Back at their penthouse, she laid out the second folder. Mason read it, silently, slowly, then looked up. This goes all the way to the Federal Infrastructure Board, Harper nodded. We're not fighting a family anymore. We're fighting a network. Mason sat back. Then we'll need more than Graves. We'll need allies. Vivian Cole returned. The next morning, and when she saw the folder, her face went pale. You understand what this means? She asked. If we move forward, there's no coming back. Harper met her gaze. I don't want to come back. Vivian nodded. Then we go public, but carefully, targeted. A leak here, a hearing there. We don't blow the house down, we pull out the foundation. Mason placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. You sure about this? Harper took a deep breath. I was born for this. But even as she said it, a part of her wondered, was this justice or obsession? Because somewhere deep inside, a new fire had started, and she wasn't sure if she could put it out. The first leak hit the news like a slow knife, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet report buried in the morning cycle. Infrastructure. Contract awarded to Shell Company with ties to defunct Kensington Trust. Most skipped over it, but those who knew, those who were watching, froze. Vivian Cole had been right. Pull the foundation, and the house would tremble before it crumbled. Mason watched the reactions with a strategist's eye. The real panic wouldn't come until the second leak. That one was bigger. Internal memos reveal alleged collusion between government advisors and offshore network. The word collusion sparked fire. Subcommittees formed, lawyers prepared, politicians scrambled. And behind it all, Harper stayed invisible, watching her storm unfold. But not everyone was fooled. Julian Graves returned. He found Harper in a quiet rooftop cafe, disguised beneath sunglasses and a hooded coat. You've been busy, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. You disappeared, she replied. Had to. My brother was circling, and you were about to set off a chain reaction. Harper leaned forward. Why didn't you tell me about Alden? Graves's eyes darkened. Because if I had, you wouldn't have stopped at exposure. You would have hunted him. Harper's silence was answer enough. Graves lit a cigarette, his voice lower now. You've crossed a line. There's no going back, not even for you. Harper sipped her tea. Good. I'm not interested in going back. Graves studied her, then dropped something on the table. A silver flash drive. This is the last of it. A list of silent investors. Names so deep in the system, even I had to bleed for them. Harper didn't reach for it. What's the price? Graves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. When it's over, you erase me from everything. Harper blinked. You want to vanish. Graves nodded. I want to stop running. She took the drive. Back in their apartment, Mason ran the contents, pages and pages of names, senators, CEOs, even members of the Justice Department. This isn't a scandal, he murmured. It's a revolution. Harper stood behind him, arms crossed. Then we start with the loudest. Name, she pointed to the top, Senator Willa Denton. Publicly incorruptible, privately bought and sold for years. Vivian orchestrated the plan. We leak her connection to a failed housing project overseas, she said, one that funneled through Alden's original network. We'll tie it to the Kensington Fund using her own signatures. Mason hesitated. This could implode the entire regulatory body. Vivian's answer was cold and clear. Good. The leak hit harder than expected. Denton denied everything until footage surfaced of a closed-door meeting from 5 years prior. The walls came crashing down. Her resignation came within 48 hours. 2 others followed. Harper watched the city shift beneath her hands. And for the first time, she understood what real power looked like. But then, the warning came. A package. No return address. Inside, a photograph of Mason, taken that morning. On the back, a single sentence. Call off your crusade, or bury him next. Harper stared at it in silence. Then she burned it. She found Mason in the atrium, pacing, clearly aware something was wrong. She handed him the ashes. They're watching. Mason nodded. I figured. We're getting too close. Harper took his hand. I need you to trust me now, no matter what happens next. Mason's voice was steel. I always have. That night, Harper didn't sleep. She stared at the city below, the light of their movement catching fire across the skyline. They had started the collapse. But she was beginning to understand. Burning the system down is easy. Building something new out of the ashes, that's the real war. The city pulsed with unease. Power was shifting. People once untouchable now found themselves cornered, exposed. Backroom deals dried up. Boardrooms who grew tense. Every whisper carried a threat. Harper walked through it all unseen, a storm cloaked in silk and silence. But Mason felt the weight growing behind her eyes, how each victory demanded a piece of her soul. She sat alone in the old cathedral downtown, one she used to visit with her mother. The stained glass filtered light in fractured rainbows. She stared up at it, wondering if redemption could ever follow vengeance. A soft voice behind her broke the silence. You're building something terrible, Harper. It was Julian Kensington, her father. I came to stop you before you become them. Harper didn't move. Too late for sermons. Julian sat beside her. You've become everything they feared. Strategic, relentless, brilliant. But you're forgetting the cost. She turned to him, her voice hard. You disappeared. Let them destroy me. Don't preach to the child you left behind. Julian didn't argue. I left to protect you. But protection and abandonment look too similar through a child's eyes. Back at the apartment, Mason and Vivian Cole finalized the next target, Alden Graves. Harper hadn't seen him, but they traced his movements through dummy accounts, crypto trails, and one offshore holding in Tangier. He was preparing an escape. Vivian narrowed her eyes at the data. He's not hiding, she said. He's regrouping. They called Julian Graves. He agreed to meet, but only in public. A park, broad daylight, neutral ground. Harper and Mason arrived first, their eyes scanning for danger. Graves appeared minutes later, alone, his hands visible. You stirred a nest, he said. And, now the wasps are moving. Harper stood tall. We're not scared. Graves smiled faintly. You should be. Alden doesn't lose. He survives. Mason stepped in. Where is he? Graves exhaled. He's boarding a yacht tonight. Private dock. Heading toward the Red Coast. If he makes it, you'll never touch him again. Harper's fists clenched. Then he won't make it. Graves looked at her, really looked. He's my brother, Harper. What happens next, you can't undo. She didn't blink. He undid my family first. They move fast. Vivian called in a contact at Interpol. Mason used an old favor from a shipping client. Harper found herself once again stepping into the underworld, threading legal pressure with whispered blackmail. By nightfall, they had an intercept team on standby, a journalist prepped for a live story, and Harper. Harper prepared to face the man who ghosted her life before she ever knew his name. The dock was nearly silent when they arrived. A crescent moon hung low, the yacht gleamed under floodlights, and Alden Graves stood at the top of the gangway, dressed in linen, calm as still water. Harper Kensington, he called, voice smooth. I was wondering when you'd show. She walked alone. Mason and Vivian stayed behind. You killed my family, she said. No, he replied. I ended a game your father started. He wasn't innocent. Harper's voice dropped. But I was, and you left me in the fire. Alden smirked. And look what the fire forged. A beat of silence. Then blue lights ignited behind them. Sirens, agents, flash photography. Interpol moved in. Alden turned to run but froze as Harper raised her phone. One more step and this goes live. He stopped. You've made powerful enemies. Harper tilted her head. They're about to be very lonely. The arrest was swift. The headline came faster. Alden Graves captured in international sting. Kensington heiress leads investigation. Harper's face graced every screen. Back at the apartment, she collapsed into Mason's arms. For once, there were no words, just silence and breath, and something like peace. But in the darkness, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. A message, you've only scratched the surface, because every kingdom burned, leaves behind its secrets. And Harper had just uncovered the next one, the next few days blurred. Alden's arrest rocked the political world. Media spun theories, celebrated Harper as a whistleblower, a survivor, a woman who tore down giants. But Harper didn't feel triumphant. She felt watched. The message, you've only scratched the surface, kept her awake at night. Mason tried to calm her, but Harper knew something had shifted. They hadn't reached the bottom. They'd merely removed a layer. Vivian was the first to notice the pattern. We've been so focused on Alden, she said. We missed the shadow he was standing in. She laid out a new thread. Contracts, old partnerships, military subcontracts routed through defense councils. There's another player, older, more careful and deeper in the system. Harper leaned over the documents. Name. Vivian hesitated. No one knows, but his code name is J. Just that. J. Harper stared at the single letter like it held all her answers. Later that evening, Harper received a letter on heavy cardstock. No envelope, just a wax seal. Inside, 5 words. You've come far. Meet me. The address led to a private estate outside the city. One Harper remembered. It once belonged to her family. Now it belonged to someone else. She arrived alone. The estate hadn't changed. The marble lions, the iron gate, the fountain that hadn't worked in years. She stepped into the foyer, the same scent of oak and lavender lingering. A man waited in the drawing room, older, grey suit, unassuming. Harper, he said, I've been expecting you. She narrowed her eyes. You're Jay. He smiled gently. That's what they call me, but my name is Jonas Vale. She froze. Clara's uncle. He nodded. She never knew what I did, and I never wanted her to. Harper stepped closer. Why send for me? Jonas walked to the window. Because Alden was a soldier, but I wrote the war. Harper clenched, her jaw. Then why not stop it? Jonas turned slowly. Because I believed it was necessary, until I saw what it cost you. He handed her a box. Inside, photos, letters, documents tracing the rise and manipulation of over a dozen industries. I made the system, he said. Now I want you to break it, the right way. Harper's voice was ice. Why help now? Jonas looked older than before. Because I'm dying, and I won't leave behind an empire built on shadows. Back home, Mason watched Harper unpack the box. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Harper looked up. This is the true architecture, not just destruction, but design, controlled collapse. Vivian arrived minutes later. When she saw the files, her eyes widened. With this, we don't just finish them. We erase the infrastructure. We bankrupt the game. But Harper hesitated. Not because she lacked the will, but because she knew what came after. If they destroyed this system, the world would lose pillars that held it together, even if those pillars were rotting from within. Mason saw it in her face. You're afraid of what happens if you win. Harper whispered. I'm afraid of what comes next. They spent the night going through everything. Harper traced the blueprints of power. Vivian mapped the network. Mason built the strategy. And when dawn came, they had a decision to make. Jonas had given them the final puzzle piece. But he had also warned her, if you press send, you change the world, and the world may not forgive you for it. Harper stood on the rooftop, the flash drive in her hand. Mason joined her. What now? He asked. She looked at the city, quiet, unaware. Now, we pull the final thread. Mason took her hand. Together. Harper smiled softly. Always. But in the shadows, someone else watched. Because if Jonas Vale had enemies, they were now Harper's. Harper had always believed the hardest part would be the beginning, stepping out of the ashes, reclaiming her name. But now, with the truth in her hands, the end felt heavier. Jonas's files were more than a confession. They were a blueprint to systemic corruption. Exposing them would collapse more than empires. It would destabilize institutions, governments, lives. You don't reveal something like this, Vivian said, without knowing the cost. Mason stood by her side as she prepared the final release. We do this, he said, and you can't go back to being anonymous. Harper nodded. Then I won't be. They spent the next 24 hours reviewing every file, confirming the chain of evidence. Vivian drafted the release in legal terms. Mason created a backup on a secure offshore server. And Harper recorded a video. No script, no cuts, just her voice. My name is Harper Kensington, she said into the lens, and this is the truth they never wanted you to hear. As she uploaded it, the servers blinked to life. The first blast went to international media, the second to watchdog organizations, the third to public forums, places no one could censor. It spread like a wildfire. In minutes, Harper's name trended globally. In hours, whistleblowers came forward. In a day, world leaders issued statements. Some denied, others resigned. Jonas Vale's name surfaced. The media painted him as a ghost king. Some called Harper a hero, others called her reckless. But none of it mattered now, because the truth was out, and it couldn't be taken back. That night, they gathered in the penthouse. Vivian, Mason, Harper, and Julian. The family that remained, the team that survived. They didn't celebrate. They just breathed. What happens now? Julian asked. Harper looked out at the skyline. We rebuild, carefully, transparently, and we never let this happen again. But Vivian frowned. You'll be a target. Not everyone will want The new world you're making. Harper nodded. Then let them try. Hours later, Mason and Harper stood on the rooftop where everything had begun. The city below wasn't just lights anymore. It was a symbol. "You know," Mason said, "you could walk away now. No one would blame you." Harper took his hand. "But I wouldn't forgive myself." He smiled. "You changed the world." She smiled back. "Not yet, but I've started." Then her phone buzzed, a secure line. Unknown. She answered. A distorted voice spoke. "Congratulations, Harper. You exposed a branch, but the roots still run deep." The call ended. No number, no trace. Harper stood still, not in fear, in resolve, because now she understood. The war wasn't over, it was evolving, and she had no intention of retreating. 3 months later, the world was different. Some called it a reckoning, others a revolution. Global markets dipped and recovered, political landscapes shifted, investigations spread like veins across nations, rooting out decades of buried deceit. Harper's files were now a global archive, protected, decentralized, and beyond suppression. She was no longer just a name. She was a symbol, loved, hated, feared. But she didn't live in that echo. She lived in the quiet. In a modest office above an old bookstore, Harper began again. She called it The Foundation, a non-profit, dedicated to rebuilding ethical infrastructures, creating transparency coalitions, and protecting the whistleblowers who had once stood where she had. No lavish buildings, no corporate gloss, just integrity and fire. Mason was there, always. Not as a shadow, but as a partner. They were different now, not lovers forged in chaos, but builders of something enduring, something they could grow, without needing to burn anything down. Julian Kensington, once a ghost, now taught seminars under a pseudonym, teaching future leaders what not to become. Vivian Cole expanded her legal practice into a global network. "Truth isn't a single case," she said once, "it's a lifestyle." But the message Harper received that night never left her mind. You exposed a branch. The roots still run deep. She replayed it often, not out of fear, but as a reminder, because she understood now that justice wasn't a destination, it was a choice, every day, every breath. One morning, she found a white envelope slipped under her door. No seal, no name, just a simple phrase typed in bold. "We're not finished, Harper." Inside, a photo of a building under construction in Geneva. Her heartbeat slowed. She knew what it meant. The next chapter had begun. She walked to the window, the morning, light spilling across her desk, and she smiled, not because she was safe, but because she was ready. What did you think of this story? Give it a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important to us. If you made it this far, comment chocolate. Only those who watched until the end will understand your message. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. For more inspiring stories, leave a like and share it with someone you care about.